So you set goals, you make plans, and then you never follow through. Here's exactly why, and here's how to stop this cycle. And I probably sound really bad today, maybe look a little rough. We had a rough weekend. In fact, I'm going to share this with you guys, but I'm looking right outside my window, where I found my dog passed away. And she was with us for 12 years, and it was very unexpected. And so I was committed to filming this podcast today, but I'm not going to lie, we had a rough weekend. Just the grief and that process that everybody has to go through, especially the unexpected. And we didn't expect Charlie to pass at all, in fact, and we weren't preparing for that moment. And she must have decided or chosen, is from what our conclusion is on the circumstances and all the facts that we kind of came across, was she knew she was ready to go, and she went across the field, the open lot, across our house, and she laid there to rest, and she passed away in the sun on Thursday, unfortunately. So it was unfortunate, and obviously I'm trying to get over that still, and my wife and all that. So I committed to filming this podcast, but I probably sound a little rough too because I have a really bad cold, um, and so I've been dealing with a cold in that situation, but we have a really good podcast today, so I really want to share some really good stuff. And like I said, you set goals, you make plans, and you just don't follow through a lot of times. And I'm going to talk about the reasons as to what is happening when people do that when it comes to money, because this is a very common issue. And when you understand the kind of like the behind the scenes or behind the curtain, the reason this stuff is happening, it's much easier to course correct. It's much easier to have that awareness level to where you're able to fix the problem. But if you don't have that, it's really hard. So the biggest thing is like when we're talking about, um, being able to overcome the constant cycle of setting a goal and then not accomplishing it, and setting a goal and not accomplishing it. You break down your self-confidence a lot, and there's a lot of self-sabotage that happens during this. And so people naturally have their upper limits. And what do I mean by that? When a person sets out on a goal, or when a person sets out and just in life, you, based on your experiences, based on your background, based on everything that's, all of your collective experiences throughout life, the people that you've been with, the situations that you've been part of, all of that kind of like builds this like narrative in your mind, and you set this upper limit. You might see other people being, hitting different levels of success, but you have this defined belief in your mind that you can change at any point in time. But oftentimes you say, this is my upper limit, meaning I can probably reach this level during my lifetime. I can't be this. I can't be this. I can only be this. And you start to believe that. And when your belief system is that, you start to align all your actions and everything you do with that upper belief, or the upper tier, upper level belief system. And some of those beliefs can be good, like some of those can be pretty high levels of success, but some of those are very limiting, and they're actually holding you back in a big way. And your subconscious belief of that, really defines your maximum potential, unfortunately. And that could be good or bad. So some people are able to continue to break through that roof, that, let's call it a glass ceiling. And some people are so stuck in their ways that they consistently do the same thing over and over and over, is they only think they can get to X level. And once they're there, they start to pull back in different ways for different reasons. One of the big things I see oftentimes are, and you'll be very accustomed to these because you're going to be, oh, that's me, or, the money scripts from your childhood. So we work with a behavioral psychologist in Budget Dog Academy with all my students. And what she does is she will uncover your subconscious within about 15 minutes. And it's a very enlightening experience for all my students. They love it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. Most go in nervous. Most come out very enlightened and very excited because they can now work towards basically breaking through that glass ceiling that they've created themselves. And so one of the money scripts that you hear probably often, or you can think about, is my parents always said rich people are greedy. So every time I start building wealth, I actually pull back. And you might not even know that. Consciously, you might be like, no, I don't fall victim to that. But like, what you don't realize is how ingrained your subconscious is, and how that like dictates all your behavior. And oftentimes, you do things unknowingly, and subconsciously you are pulling back in different ways that you don't really directly see in a given day. And you wonder why you can't break through that ceiling, or you can't go to that next level, or you can't become a millionaire, or whatever the case is because you've always had that deep ingrained belief that even if you don't want to admit it, you've heard your parents, you've heard people around you talk about rich people are greedy, billionaires are greedy. I don't want to be like that. And so as you start to build that wealth, you keep pulling back, you keep pulling back, you keep pulling back. You start to justify different things. You're like, well, we only live once, so we're going to go ahead and splurge on that or do this or do that. But really what that's stemming from is you're giving yourself comfort from that deeply ingrained belief. And so you're doing these things that technically are pulling you back, but it's not because you really want to do those things. It's because that provides a sense of relief for the subconscious. And so you start to do things like spend a bunch of money and splurge and get that new car or whatever the case is. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that. But you start to do those types of things because that actually holds you back from going to that next level, while also justifying a very, hey, I'm going to live now. I'm not going to just, save all my money, which is not the point. But you get my point. Like, this happens all the time with people. And so I think generational beliefs are big here, because the more you believe in yourself that you can go to the next level, you can become the next level of yourself or the next version of yourself. The deeply ingrained beliefs start to be within you. And you start to align. The more your beliefs increase, the more all your actions align with those beliefs, and the further you can get in life. And so, you probably have heard a few things like money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. How many times have you heard that growing up? I can tell you, I literally live that like all the time. If I asked for anything growing up, by no means, this is not a shot at my parents. I love my parents. They were great. They provided everything. But like if I were to ask for something outside of the norm, I want a jersey of my favorite player, or like, I want baseball cards, or I want a baseball bat, I would hear phrases like that all the time. Money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. Do you know how much that costs? Like, do you know how hard dad has to work to get that? Like, I would hear that all the time. And so it was always me like feeling restrictive in a sense. And I had to get past that to be able to build real wealth. And up until about 23, and still to this day, really, like, this is a constant thing that's ongoing. We're all human. We all kind of default back to the basics. But when I was, 23, up until that point, I did have these deeply ingrained beliefs that were holding me back in a big way. And I was a big saver. So like my parents always talked about saving money, but they never talked about investing money. They're like, you should save your money, but I really didn't have any financial education besides just, save money. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm saving money. This is great, but I was building zero wealth. I was actually losing money to inflation. And so I wish I would have known that earlier in age. But, growing up, like I felt like I had to hoard money and save a bunch of money, because I always remember like my parents always saying things like that. Like I remember specifically, I'm a huge Cleveland, Indians, Cavs, Browns fan, unfortunately. And, I always wanted my favorite jerseys. So I had like a Tim Couch jersey. Shout out to my 2002 Browns. Got that one autographed. But I wanted a Jim Thome jersey. And my parents were doing landscaping. They're like, hey, it was $75, I remember specifically. And they're like, if you help us with landscaping over the weekend, you can then get your Jim Thome jersey. And like, this was like it was a good lesson in a sense, right? You work for your money. You do have to work for your money. There's obviously you can build and invest on top of that, but you do, at least in the beginning stage, you had to work for your money. You had to get some money somehow. And so my parents did teach me that lesson. And I remember I worked it felt like, at least as a child, all day, 8 hours, 2 days in a row. And I worked so incredibly hard, and I got the Jim Thome jersey. But like for me, I remember how hard I worked, and like I don't know how old I was, 6 or 7. And you're working full days and landscaping when you're a young kid. That's a lot. So like I was thinking, how much work went into just to get that jersey. And I was always thinking like, wow, if I just got that jersey with that much work, I really gotta work really hard. And when I work, I want to like save all my money so I don't have to feel like that restrictive feeling. And like I grew up like that. Like that's how I was. And so that was so deeply ingrained in me, even as like, as I got into my 20s and my career and I started making real money, like those things still stuck with me. And so until I met my mentors at Deloitte, which I do have a podcast on about my 3 mentors at Deloitte, it took me a long time to be able to freely accept and let go of money and be able to create value because realizing it would come back to me. And until I did that, until I was able to overcome that, I really didn't build real wealth. And so that was a constant revolving cycle of my upper, limit. I believe that my upper limit was, working for my money and then realizing I have a cap on my energy, time, and, resources. And so I got to be careful. I got to like hoard it all. And that didn't really do me much good. And that kept me in I couldn't break through that ceiling ever until about 23, 24. Actually, I would argue 25 because, the first year when we started focusing on our money, we paid off a bunch of debt. So it's still like saving, hoarding, and being able to like pay off debt, feeling like we're coming from behind, or like releasing a weight. But we didn't really start building real wealth at that point in time. And then once the debt was paid off, then I could take it to the next level and start saying, hey, I'm going to take this money I'm earning, all of it now because I'm able to. I'm going to put it into the stock market, into real estate, into private equity, all the investments we have, Bitcoin, and we're going to let it grow and we're going to see it compound. And then we're going to go provide value out in the world and make more money and then continue that cycle over and over and over to where we see now this compound interest cycle is just contagious. And I've rewired those beliefs, but it took me so long to overcome that, in multiple years of just repeating the same cycle, just like I did growing up. Repeating that same cycle, I had to change my cycle and then repeat it. And even to this day, there are definitely times where I go back into default mode of like, oh, I got to hoard. And this comes from somebody that's financially free, just to give you guys perspective. This is somebody that has enough money to live the rest of my life totally fine. And I still feel sometimes like, I don't know, like there's, like when we lost our house due to the mold and mycotoxin situation, there was all of a sudden a $300,000 bill in our hands. We could easily handle it, technically speaking. We had all the money we needed for it, but it didn't feel like that. And like sometimes the emotional side of money is way more powerful than the actual objective like lens that you should be looking money through. So there's this like there's common phrases or money scripts. There's things that you grow up believing, and it's unfortunate, but it holds you back. Here's another thing I've dealt with personally that holds a lot of you guys back is the subconscious fear of success. Like that sounds very weird. And I talked to my behavioral psychologist who's in Budget Law Academy for all my students, but I would always say like, I'm afraid to build something great because the more I have, the more I have to lose. And that is it's a very common thing among successful people, she told me. So Heather broke this down for me tremendously. She's like, you are building something great, so you're gaining more, but as a result, oftentimes people are afraid to lose that. So like I was afraid to build the business. I was afraid to build up my finances because deep down, like there was like this thought, like, well, if I build a lot, that means I have way more pressure and stress to then potentially lose it all. And I saw my dad lose it all growing up. And so she made that connection for me. She was like, well, you saw your dad move up in a house because when we grew up, my brothers, we had three boys in one bedroom. And so it was a bunk bed with two on the bottom, one on the top, one bedroom. Lots of fun times, lots of good memories. But when the house was very small for a family of four, because my other brother was finally born and he was in the other room. And so we had two bedrooms for four kids. And so we had to, my parents wanted to move up. They considered renovating the house, adding an extension, but they decided to move up to this house. So we moved up to this house. And a couple years later, we lost the house in the Great Recession that we all know, 2007 to 2009. And when we lost that house, I saw my dad, like, it felt like he got a new car. He got like the Chrysler 300, which was like a big time deal at that point in time. But he had the Chrysler, he had the new house, very nice house, beautiful house. And we lost everything within a couple years. We moved up in like 2003 or 4, and we lost in 06, 07 time. And so I saw and he had his own company as well. He lost that company. Like all of this was at one time. So he lost the company, lost the car, lost the house. I just saw my family crumble like effectively. And so it's hard when you grow up like that and you see that, and then you go into the same cycle and you start building your own business that you saw your dad lose. And obviously, he was in the mortgage business. So that was like what the Great Recession was, crashing of the housing market. And so, man, I grew this business. I started growing the business, and there was like this. Still to this day, I'm going to be totally honest. Like there's things where I'm like, man, I built this up so great. I built this financial freedom, but what if I lose it all? And I still battle with that. And there's this subconscious fear of success for a lot of people. This is not just a me thing. This is very, very common. If I actually hit my goal, then what? Who would I become? Would I still belong with my friends or family? You know, when you grow as a person, and when you grow a business, when you grow financially, not everybody comes with you. And like I dealt with that hard. Like my friend group that I was around when I was 18, well, really 16 to 23, like in order to get to the next level, like none of them really cared about what I was doing. I was getting my CPA, I was building wealth, I wanted to do all these things, getting my career, and they were still in that fun party mode. And, you know, all love to them, you know, no hard feelings, but it just, we were going separate directions. You know, people grow different ways in life, and we were going this way, they were going this way. And there's no right or wrong, but there is a separation that occurs. And is, you know, as humans, that we're tribal, we want to be part of a group. So in order to go to the next level, oftentimes you have to separate from a group, be independent, at least for some time, until you find your new group to be part of as you grow. And some people stay that independent route, and they go, you know, to great heights as a result, and they don't look for that group. But growing up, that's how I was. You know, that's a survival mechanism since the dawn of time. And it's a very interesting you know, piece of psychology that you as you separate, as you become more, you kind of let go of your friends, you kind of let go of your families. There's some people in your family that might even be like, why are you, like, they'll make comments like, oh, is that in the budget? Like, you've heard that if you've been building wealth publicly or knowingly within the family, you've heard that exact question. Oh, is that within the budget? And it's just like obnoxious, it's annoying, you hear it over and over, and you want to separate as a result. But sometimes people default back into, oh, well, maybe I'm taking this too serious. Maybe I'm pushing too hard. Maybe I should be like my family. Maybe I should you know, enjoy life more. And you start to go back into that same exact phase psychologically, because of everything you grew up with, all the people you've been with, the support group, because that's a psychological thing to be part of a group. And by doing things different, you're literally separating from that group. And whether we like it or not, whether we can survive on our own or not, deep down, we've always, as a human species, been part of groups. And so it's something that is massively important to understand as you're building and stuff like that. You know, I think there's a fear of standing out. Like, you know, especially when I went to publicly talk about this stuff online, like all my family and friends started seeing this, and like that wasn't my goal to like sit there and like talk about it like that, but I needed to bring awareness to it, to the masses that didn't know who I was, didn't know what I was doing. And when I shared that story, obviously friends and family started picking up on it, like, oh wow, he actually has some money. He actually is, whatever he's doing was working. And I took that with good, and I tried to help them. But still, you still get those comments. Oh, come on, you can afford that. You got millions of dollars. Like, you know, I get those comments all the time. And there's that, just like that constant, you know, butting of heads in a sense, in just conversation. And that's hard for a lot of people. And so the other thing is, one of the most important things I think is, you guys all know what Stockholm Syndrome is. I'm going to read it. It's a psychological phenomenon where hostages or victims of abuse develop positive feelings, empathy, or even loyalty towards their captors or abusers, often due to a survival mechanism in a traumatic situation. You guys know Elizabeth Smart? Very common situation here. You know, she was abducted. She was taken in by a captor, but she didn't, you know, oftentimes those captors give the ability for them to leave, those people at the hostages, but they don't leave because there's a safety net of knowing, of just knowing. Because if they leave, it's scary. It's out in the open. It's unknown. And it's familiar and safe. Whether it's right or wrong, there's a lot of people in abusive relationships that stay. And you have to realize that that's not a choice, that they're like actively, like, a lot of people are like, well, why wouldn't you just leave if you're dealing with an abusive relationship? It's Stockholm Syndrome a lot of times. It's something that people are dealing with, they're trying to figure out, but they feel safe in the known. And every scary movie you watch, why do you think they don't show the bad guy? You see him like, you know, you see like a shadow, or you see him like pass a window, like it behind somebody, or there's a call and you hear the voice but you don't see the person, or you see a figure out in the field. but you don't ever like see the person until the very end because it's an unknown and people don't like the unknown. That's a very that's a known thing. And so the unknown is scary. And so if you know, even if it's a bad situation, if it's just safe, like, oh, building wealth is unknown. So staying in the same situation, even if you're broke, kind of feels better sometimes psychologically. And so that's important to understand as you're building real wealth. Like this stuff is massively interfering with your wealth building journey. It's not necessarily you might you might self-sabotage yourself in a lot of ways. You might say like, oh, I'm just not, people do this all the time. You say you want to be a millionaire, but deep down you still think you're bad with money. And so people default to the identity they believe is true. Like that's a very common thing. So if you believe something's true, like your upper limit, you're going to align with that upper limit. If you believe like the sky's the limit, even higher, you're going to align with that. And that takes time, trial, and experience, and over and over and over and over and repetition and repetition and repetition. It's like you're going to the gym. And at first, let's say you're benching or you're deadlifting let's say 200 pounds, I don't know, everyone's at a different level, but 200 pounds is a heavy weight, right, to begin with. And you finally get to like 180, you're like, you can kind of see that 200 in near sight. And then you like get to the 200, you're like, oh, wow, what else is next? Like 200, I can do 200. Why can't I do 205 or 210? And you start to push yourself and you can get that. And you keep getting it. And the belief of hitting those small momentum goals, like these goals don't need to be huge. It could be, I'm starting by a high yield savings account. I'm starting with, something very small, just a savings goal or just paying off a credit card debt. But you prove to yourself you can do that. And when you're true to yourself and you don't self-sabotage yourself and you prove to yourself that you've won or hit the goal, why can't you do the next goal? And I can tell you right now, this was one of the most powerful things I've ever done. And I noticed it in myself and looking backwards. At 23, I didn't believe I could do all that. Like, dude, at 23, you think I believed I was going to be able to build a huge business, build financial freedom by 33, retire my wife, quit my 9 to 5, move across the country. Like, dude, no chance in this world did I believe that at that point in time. But what we did was pay off the debt. And the first one we did was a $3,500 bed loan. And that was $75 a month, 0% interest, Synchrony Bank. Remember that very vividly. But that said, okay, if I can pay that off, why can't I do the next one? Why can't I do the next one? Why can't I do the next one? Why can't I paid off all my debt in 1 year, $76,000 of debt. Why can't I pay off my house? Why can't I build a lot of wealth? Well, I don't really know what investing is. So I gotta slow and steadily get into that. Well, I'm going to invest my 401k first. Oh, well, I just did that. Why can't I do an IRA? Oh, why can't I do a taxable brokerage? All of a sudden, these things compound. These things compound over time. And eventually you have that momentum factor is until you see yourself, the identity of being able to do that, and you believe that you can do it because you've proven to yourself, you're not going to align yourself, but focus on small little goals. And there's just such a momentum factor and a confidence factor to that you can't explain. But until people see themselves as somebody who handles money well, they'll keep proving the opposite. So if you constantly are telling yourself, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, I stink at math. I stink at math, really. There's calculators and there's Excel templates. The math is not holding you back, guys. If you are out there and you have not built wealth or chosen to build wealth or aligned yourself with building wealth, because you don't think you did well in high school math algebra class, you're just holding yourself back and you're in the self-sabotage process. And it is so incredibly amazing when you get over that belief. So here are some signs that you're actually doing this. So like that's a lot of like the psychology side of things, different things that are holding you back, traumatic, experiences, scarcity programming, subconscious beliefs, fear of success, upper limits, maximum potential, money scripts. We talked about that stuff. Now, here are some signs you're doing it. So spending sprees after hitting a financial milestone. So you hit this financial milestone and like I said earlier, you start just spending reckless amounts of money, but you say in your head, oh, I'm just celebrating. There's nothing wrong with celebrating for the right reason. It's like getting a nice car. There's nothing wrong with getting a nice car, but if you're doing it to prove your worth, or you're trying to impress a neighbor, or you grew up with nothing, so it makes you feel better, that you have something that you've proven to yourself, you have this thing, you're going to constantly go into the same cycle. You're going to hit a milestone, you're going to go backwards. You're going to hit a milestone, you're going to go backwards. And a lot of times people do that with spending sprees. A lot of people over research. Guys, money is very simple. When I talk about in my national bestseller, The Roadmap to Financial Freedom, this book is a millionaire's guide to building automated wealth. You can get in the show notes if you guys want. This book is the simplest way to build wealth, and it's within Budget Dollar Academy. If you guys are looking to book a call with my team, go in the show notes below as well. Book a call with my team to take this to the next level, because most wealth building, like the technical steps, I can get you through in my sleep. I can teach anybody at any level all of the technical steps very simply, but the emotional side, the behavioral side is so much deeper, and it has to be talked about so much more. And that's why this podcast is a thing, because nobody in the financial world really talks about, they might say it, Ramsey and team and other people will say, yes, money is behavioral, money is psychology, but very few people talk about like the behind the scenes as to what's actually holding them back. Also the signs I'm talking about right now, and then also the tools to overcome it, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But a lot of people over research. They become like obsessive with like just ungodly amounts of research that gets them nowhere. Distracting yourself with other goals, very common. I'm going to call out my team member because this is a sign I see all the time with him. If he's trying to be productive, he's trying to do a bunch of things, and oftentimes I'll see him in Slack, like our communication tool that we use for as a team, just messaging everybody. I'm like, dude, get out of Slack. That's not productive. You're just distracting yourself right now. That's my sign for him that he's my CEO. I'm like, dude, you're over. I know what you're doing. Like you don't know what to do. You're going in this loop, and then you're going in Slack just to bug people, and you're bugging everybody. Stop. And the other thing he does oftentimes is he defaults to something he feels comfortable with. In a sense, Stockholm Syndrome, right? He knows the no. He's really good at student success. That's why it's why he started with us. He's phenomenal. And I'm not ragging him at all. Like, that's not the point here. My point is I notice these trends in different ways, not just money, but like he will start really diving into student success. And our student success is very buttoned up. Like within Budget Dollar Academy, like we have a very, very defined student success. There is not much room. Like there's room for improvement in anything, but man, that is not our focus area in this business at all. Like we are locked in with getting students results. That's something we do very well at. And it's very, very like systematic. We have like tags and documentation, just so much. I could go and I love that topic, by the way. But we have it so buttoned up. But all of a sudden, I'll see him hanging out in student success. I'm like, dude, we have a whole team dedicated to this. That's not your focus right now. But he's doing that because he feels safe. And he's distracting himself with other things when that doesn't actually push us forward. Like that's very micro win type of stuff at this point in time, because we already have the macro wins happening all the time there. So to get in there and try to like fix things that don't need to be fixed, it's like that's not what we need help with. We've helped thousands of students continue to dominate their wins. We need help on the marketing side, or we need help on the content side, or we need help on the the back end stuff. What can we offer after the academy? We need things like the big movers, building a whole new personal finance suite for children. Like that is what we should be focusing on, not things that we already do really well on, but it's a distraction. And oftentimes you distract yourself with different little things that come up just so you don't have to focus on the actual thing you need to be focused on. Now, here are some tools to overcome this. So there's a mental pattern interrupt trick that I used and have used many times. So pause when you're tempted to sabotage and ask, what am I trying to avoid feeling right now? Because oftentimes it's not like when, let's just say you're bringing up, you're supposed to open a Roth IRA because after watching my content, the Roth IRA is like a pretty, I wouldn't say universal like financial tool that most people should be using, but it is, right? So like I'm always careful with saying that, but like it's pretty relevant to most people in America. And so you should be opening that, but then you don't. And you start to go through the sabotage process. You start distracting yourself. You start going you start to just like do things that you shouldn't be doing. You feel unsafe, so you start like researching some random stuff online and trying to become a health freak, or you do some weird psychology thing, right? What are you feeling at that moment that's holding you back from starting the Roth IRA? The Roth IRA is not hard to start. I can show you in 3 seconds of how to open one. So what is the feeling that's holding you back? We need to address that, and we need to pause ourselves, and we need to feel it. I talked about my dog. Unfortunately, I found her in a lot across my house I'm looking at right now. And I saw her little body laying there. It was the most sad thing in the world, but she was ready to go. She peacefully passed. It was, it's whatever. And during that moment, there could be so many different things in this world. You could take drugs, you could drink, you can do all these different things to like hide that emotion. But I've always been a big believer in feeling the emotion, because feeling that emotion, there's no joy without pain. You have to feel one extreme to feel the other extreme. And so the feeling that you're feeling inside when you're preventing yourself from getting that success, you have to feel that. If you don't, if you cover it up with drugs, if you cover it up with alcohol, if you cover it up with distraction, if you cover it up with scrolling, whatever you're doing, you're not moving forward. You're just staying in a perpetual cycle that just is never ending. And so feeling the pain is a good thing. It's a positive thing. Oftentimes emotion is the driver. So if you allow yourself to feel that pain, you pause, you take this mental pattern script and you say, I'm going to pause. You can actually get further and you have more success. I've dealt with a lot of pain, man. Like I literally tweeted that especially my dog passing, we just sold our house. We just had a huge, 4 months of hell. Like if I'm gonna be totally honest, like just felt like it was never ending. It's still kind of going, like, to be honest. But during those times, like if I covered it up with, different things of outlets, just any outlet you could think of, I wouldn't feel the joy of overcoming those things. And I wouldn't feel the next step of the painful challenge. And it sucks. Like I'm human. Like you don't want to feel that pain. But at the same time, if you allow yourself, if you pause yourself and you feel it, you're going to understand where you're coming from and why you're feeling that way. And that's a really, really powerful place to be, because if I know what I'm trying to avoid feeling, I can embrace that feeling. I can then think about solutions around that feeling. And then I can then use that feeling, that negative feeling, to turn into a positive feeling. And that's a good thing. And that's hard for people to accept. People don't want to go through pain by default. So therefore, we often try to cope in many different ways. And so this is all holding us back from building real wealth. Another thing, if I had money already, what would I be doing differently? This is another tool that you can ask yourself. Write this down, guys. Journal this right now. Write this in your phone, wherever you're listening to this. If I had money already, what would I be doing differently? The reason you ask that question is for a few reasons. But if you had, let's just say, $2 million right now, I'm not saying what would you be doing differently. Like, you might be like, oh, I'm going to go to the beach and hang out on a vacation and do nothing. But like, how would you lead your life? How would you operate day to day if you knew you had unlimited money, you had unlimited funds, there was no scarcity holding you back, there was no restriction that you felt within your finances, you felt really good? How would you lead your life? What would you do during your day to change the world? Would you pursue a passion? Would you go help people? Would you volunteer? How would you lead? How would you operate mentally? Like a lot of times, like mentally, if you're in a scarcity mindset, you're constantly thinking about how do I get more? And you're never thinking about other people. You're never thinking about going to that next step. And you live in this cycle of like, you never can think outside of yourself. But if you felt really, really confident internally, financially, how would you be able to give the best of your ability? How would you show up for your kids? How would you show up for your spouse? How would you show up for your job? Would you work the same job? How would you, when you went to the gym, how would you proceed with your day? Would you be rushing through your day, hurrying up and getting a workout, hurrying up and rushing home, hurrying up and getting a shower, hurrying up and eating dinner, hurrying up and doing all these things? Or would you be at a more peaceful glide? Would you go slower, smoother, enjoy the smells, enjoy looking around, enjoy the beauties of this world? What would you be doing differently if you had everything? And I think that's an important question to ask, because oftentimes, even if you don't have everything right now, I think you'd be amazed that this world's very abundant And whether your belief system right now aligns with that this world's abundant, and you might feel scarce right now as you're listening to this, it is abundant, like very abundant. And it's a mental shift you're going to have to make with time, and it will come with the tools I'm talking about in repetitive motion, repetition, like we talk about. But if I had money already, what would I be doing differently? Another thing I always say, visualize the identity you're stepping into. Like when I was before I was a millionaire, like I knew I was going to be a millionaire, like truly identified as a millionaire. Like I knew it was like just a time gap. And oftentimes when you truly believe that you're going to be something, you will become that. Like Rory McIlroy just won the Masters, and he completed the big tour. He hit his childhood dream, and he walked off really really emotional. And then they showed a clip of him as a child watching Tiger Woods, practicing swings, working outside with like just hail and storms and still hitting golf balls. Doesn't matter what the situation was, because he truly believed he was going to compete at a Masters level and win the Masters when he was a child. Like we're talking like 6, 7, 8 years old. He believed so deeply that he was going to be the next Tiger Woods that he became the next Tiger Woods. And he just won the Masters. Like, that's an incredible story, but it's because he visualized, like they were showing videos of him and his parents, like watching the Masters or watching golf and watching Tiger win. And like he saw that and he visualized that, and he was just a little kid. But he believed that so deeply. He visualized that success so much that he just became that, because he started thinking and obsessing and like doing everything around that to become that. And it doesn't matter where he came from, what his background was. And I think that's where people go into victimhood a lot, is like they start to think, well, nobody around me is successful, so I can't be successful. And I get it, man. Like it's hard, but it doesn't mean you can't. So like visualizing your success, like nobody in my family that I know of at least was a millionaire before I was a millionaire. Like that's how little money we talk. We never talked about money. And I visualized that so deeply, and I had nobody to see around me that that were millionaires. Like I had no idea if my like family was. I don't think, I would assume no. God love them, but I don't think that was like a focus in their time. And so like I didn't have anybody to like model necessarily, or like, oh, I saw that, my brother, or I saw that my uncle or my parents or my grandparents are like really wealthy. Here's what they do. Like I didn't know that. But I did model after like people like Warren Buffett and like people that were very successful with finances. And I modeled and I visualized and I visualized and visualized, and all of a sudden I became one. And then I visualized I become financially free. I became that. I visualized be an entrepreneur and help people with this and build a great business and be able to give back. And I did that. And oftentimes that's what it takes. Visualizing the success, identifying as something you're not yet, to become that thing. I want you to journalize. I want you to journal this prompt, or at least question this for some reflection. So what's the first memory you had around money? I think that's a really important question to ask yourself, because for people that grew up like with the money scripts in their head, like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, or, we can't afford that. That might be your first memory. Like, you asked for something and your parents like yelled at you. They were having a bad day and they yelled at you. And now every time you think about money, you think of like a negative experience. Just ask yourself, like, there's no right or wrong answer. It might take some time to think about here. Don't rush this process. Go on a walk, go on a bike ride, go in the sauna, go somewhere quiet, listen to music, whatever's the best for you. What's the first memory you have around money? Do that as one of the first steps. And remember, write the other ones down as well. Another question I want you to ask yourself, write down, journal, whatever. What were you taught explicitly or implicitly about wealth growing up? That's a really important question to ask. The third question I want you to ask as well is, who would you become if you truly were financially free? And is that version of you safe to be? Those three questions are so incredibly powerful, because I can tell you right now, my first memory around money was the Jim Thome jersey. Like that was my first real experience with like earning money, getting something of value in my eyes as a 6-year-old, Cleveland Indians fan, and being able to like achieve that And the feelings that came with that, I really felt those. I still know that. I still remember the pile of mulch. I still remember the wheelbarrow, like all the details, because it was such a powerful experience. What was I taught about wealth growing up? I really wasn't taught about wealth. I was taught about working hard and saving money. Like everything we did was pick up a shift, spend the hours working. That was very ingrained in me from the get-go. And that's not how I'm going to teach my girls, because I don't think money is energy. Money is value. Money is not time spent. And that's a hard thing to get over, especially in a physical world that we live in and the way we operate as in the United States, at least. The last thing is, who would you become if you were truly financially free? And is that version safe to be? Is this going to, becoming financially free, what's that going to change your life to look like? Is that going to separate you from your family, your friends, what you know, your comfort, your known situations? I want you to journal those today. I want you to think about those. I want you to go on a walk today. And then on top of that, the other tools to overcome this outside of those journal prompts are visualizing and write this stuff down. Visualize the identity you're stepping into. That's a very important thing to do, and really, truly believe it and think it and see it. And like, I'm not even kidding, guys. On my phone background and on my whiteboard over there, I have my goals and who I wanted to be and like what I wanted to accomplish, like in front of my face at all times. So in my phone, on my screen protector, it is a subconscious thing I constantly am seeing. And I believe that, and it becomes true. My whiteboard, I always joke, but it's real. If it goes on the whiteboard, it gets done, because I truly believe that. And I see it over and over and over, and I ingrain it. And even if you don't believe it in the beginning, fake it. Because eventually, if you tell yourself it so many times, it becomes truth. That's what the media does to us as people. They say stuff so many times that people eventually just believe it's true. That's a very common known psychology trick. So even if you don't believe it, just say it. Just say it. Can't hurt you. Just say it. I'm a millionaire. I remember specifically, I was writing on my porch, I'm a 7-figure business owner. Who cares if you are or not? Just write it. Believe it. Embrace it. And then lastly, make sure you ask yourself this question and write this down, at least so you think about it. If I had money already, what would I be doing differently? And then the final one, the mental pattern interrupt trick. Pause when tempted to sabotage, which we talked about all the sabotage techniques that people could potentially use. And just ask, what am I trying to avoid feeling right now? What is the feeling you're trying to avoid at this current moment? Just write it down, embrace it, take it in, pause. I hope this episode was really deep for you and also very good and value added. And just to kind of give you guys a recap, we talked about the self-sabotage, the psychology behind why you're probably holding yourself back more so than an external force that you might be pointing to. Number 2, what are the signs that you're actually doing it? Remember, we talked about spending sprees, over researching, but not taking action, distracting yourself. And then the tools that we just talked about to overcome these things, to actually see the success you want to see. And again, this is not a technical exercise or I'm bad at math it's just unfortunate. My math brain doesn't work, so I'm not good at finance. Those are all excuses you're making. And the cool thing is you can overcome that. And I hope today was a good reflection of everything you're facing right now, and also giving you that next tier of, if you use these tools I shared with you, you're going to see a lot of success going forward. And I will see you guys next week.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brennan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.